Well, you can't complain about the drive into work each morning when you're driving a car like that. It kind of wakes me up and gets the blood flowing. And so many of you in the comment section have mentioned this 944 turbo. You'd like to hear about it, or why is it in here? This is a 1986 Porsche 944 turbo. It's owned by a good friend of mine, Bob. He's got it here. We had a timing belt service that we did on it, and we also did an electronic boost controller installed on it. We also put new motor mounts on it that were broken and damaged and in really bad shape. We also have the cluster out. The odometer quit working, and usually it's the little plastic gear that's gone bad, but in this case the stepper motor's bad. We also did a tune-up on it. We did new cap, rotor, plugs, and wires. Basically a complete service on the motor, an oil change, oil filter, coolant, this one's ready for the winter. Which brings to mind getting a car ready for the winter season. We're going to be using this car and also a couple others here in the shop to show some things that should be checked, especially in the northern hemisphere and north of the equator this time of year. Those of you that live south of the equator, check it back again in 6 months and this will apply to you. Some of the common issues this time of year, especially here in Kansas, so we have a cold snap. Sometimes it'll get down to 0 or even colder, and that's when it's really going to test your battery and your charging system. But definitely one of the most common issues I get is the blower motor isn't working, or there's no heat out of the vents. And it may be that these problems have been present for a while and people just kind of put it off, I'll get to that later, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's 0 degrees outside, and uh-oh, my blower motor don't work, and I forgot about that, or I haven't been messing with it. So one of the things you want to check in the cabin is, does your blower motor work at all speeds? And does it make any noises, bearing noises? Is it on its way out? Another thing is to check all the vent modes, is defrost, floor, vent, does those all work? And another thing to check also is the temperature dial. Does it go all the way cold? Does it go all the way hot? And is it blowing hot air like it should be? With the engine warmed up and everything's nice and hot, it should have some pretty hot air coming out of there. Usually with the blower motor issue is either the blower motor itself is dead, or there's a blower motor resistor. Those get burned up, and then you have heat only on high, or sometimes no heat at all. That's usually the fix for that. And on the dash with no heat, it's either where there's the heater core's plugged or something's going wrong with the heater core, but usually, especially on newer cars, this is the culprit. This is an actuator for HVAC systems in cars. They use these to do the vent, floor, defrost, temperature, all kinds of different things. Recirculate is done with a little electronic box like this. There's a little motor inside of it, and it moves an arm or a shaft back and forth to change the different settings. And this is usually when someone says, I don't have any heat out of my dash, or the temperature doesn't respond. This is usually the culprit. Sometimes you get lucky and they're right there underneath the dash. You can get to them. And on a few cars, the dash has to come at least away, partially apart to get to it. It's kind of a pain, but it can be very expensive. So that's one of the issues that could be with no heat. Well, now we'll be under the hood in the engine bay. This is some common things that an average driver can take a quick glance and just get an idea, is their car ready for winter? One of the things is the antifreeze. That's very important. Most of these reservoir bottles will have a maximum and a minimum marking, and you could take just a quick glance. Is there even any coolant in the reservoir, or is it full, or is it halfway full? Or you want it between minimum and max at least. Another thing you can do is purchase one of these at an auto parts store. They're usually $5 or something. They're not very expensive. Some are even $2 or $3. And what you're going to do is squeeze the bulb, suck up some antifreeze, and it's going to give you a reading on the side, the freeze point. So we'll go ahead and do that here. So this antifreeze checks good to -40 roughly. I don't think it's going to get that cold in Kansas. I don't think I've ever seen it that cold. But in your area, it may be that you need to change the concentration on your antifreeze if it gets down to that cold. If it doesn't check right, you may have to take it to a shop and get the coolant flushed or partially removed and add some antifreeze. You definitely want to make sure you check that. If this freezes during the winter, it could crack your engine block, it could crack the head, it could damage your engines. So the next thing we're going to check, we're going to actually use the Prelude because it's easy to see your serpentine belts. Look for any cracks or any wear on the outside edge, but you could also check the underside, the ribs. Check to make sure they're not severely cracked or got rocks or sand or things stuck in them. When these break, typically it can lose power steering. You could lose your alternator charging your battery. You don't want to be having that happen on the side of the road when there's a blizzard or snowstorm out. So make sure you check all your belts and make sure they're in good shape. Make sure they're nice, got some tension and are nice and tight as well. The next thing is check your hoses. You can visually inspect them to make sure there's no blisters or there'll be like a lump in it. I've seen hoses like that's just waiting to burst and leave you stranded. So there's going to be two major hoses to the radiator. This one's here and this one here. Just kind of take a visual inspection. You can also go along and squeeze the hose. It should be fairly firm and not have any weak spots or soft spots, and it shouldn't crack or make cracking noises whenever you squeeze it. The next thing to check is all your fluids. You want to check your engine oil, your brake fluid, clutch fluid if you have any, power steering fluid, your windshield washer fluid. You want to check all these things and make sure they're in good order. With the engine oil especially, you want to make sure it's full of oil, but different manufacturers recommend different weights of oil depending on the weather. It might be in the summer you can run 10W30 or 5W30, and when in extreme cold weather you might want to run 5W20 or even 0W20 on some cars. Check your user's manual. It'll say in there what's recommended. And during your next oil change, you may want to go ahead and switch over to a lighter weight oil that's appropriate for the weather in your area. On the windshield washer fluid, as each season comes around, you know, in summer they have the bug wash that washes the bugs off your windshield really good. But in the winter, you want to make sure the bottle says -20 on it. If you put summer fluid in here and it's only rated to 32 and it gets down to 0, your washer bottle could freeze solid, crack the bottle, and you won't have anything to wash the slush off your windshield. They also make some that's called de-icer. It'll actually melt ice pretty well. That might be something you want to check into too, but make sure that the fluid is ready for the cold weather. The next thing we need to check, and it's actually one of the most important ones, is your wiper blades. What you want to do is just lift up on the blade and visually inspect it. Is there any chunks missing out of it? You can run your finger along the bottom. It should be straight and smooth. There shouldn't be any cracks or broken pieces. And it should be flexible. It should be nice and pliable. It shouldn't be hard rubber like a piece of plastic almost. If there's all kinds of cracks and stuff in it, it's just going to leave streaks on your windshield, make visibility a problem. So make them that have a boot over this older style metal frame. It keeps ice from getting accumulated in there, and it'll freeze your wipers in a certain shape and it won't wipe very well. Snow and ice get packed in here and gets frozen, and it can take forever to get that melted off. So a winter blade might be an option for your car too. If you're unsure of the condition or the age of your battery, most parts stores you can stop in and they'll do a charging system check, or they can also load test your battery for you and tell you if you're on the brink of a failure or if you've got a good battery, if it's charging well. Those things need to be checked out for sure. A battery that's functioning marginally will do okay, and then the cold weather comes along, it just clicks. It won't even turn your motor over. A good instance of getting caught ill-prepared is last Christmas we went on a cruise and it was nice weather out, and when we got back it was like 13 degrees outside. It was extremely cold, and the car, it started fine, but we could tell it was just barely able to start the motor. It had been setting for a week in that cold weather. So if you have a battery that's marginal, you're out of luck. It's gonna be flat dead on you. Then you're gonna have to call for a tow truck or a jump start. Another thing that's going to be very important for traction reasons is your tires. You can easily take a penny and turn it upside down and put it in the tread, and it should at least come up to the bottom of his head. That's the minimum. It should be up around his ear or his eye or somewhere around in there. Obviously on these tires we're very aggressive. It's almost as tall as the entire penny. I'd say he's ready for winter. Now I'll show you another tire that is not. So as you can see, these tires are just below the bottom of his head, and really you can take a visual inspection here, and a lot of it's worn down, almost bald. These tires here would be a death trap on ice and snow. This is great maybe if you're street driving or something, or really on wet weather, wet roads, this would be pretty dangerous. This guy's due for a new set of tires is what I would say. One of the last things you really need to check before you head out into winter weather would be to make sure all the bulbs on the exterior of the car work. Fog lamps, turn signals, headlamps, brake lights. You'd hate to think in a whiteout condition maybe it's even a blizzard condition that your brake lights don't work and you get rear-ended because they can't see you. It's common where it snowed and the next morning it's very foggy. You want to use your fog lamps, you can't hardly see, you go to turn them on and oh yeah, I forgot. Those haven't been working all year long. Check all your bulbs out, make sure it's in good shape, check your turn signals, park lamps, everything, and make sure it's ready to roll. Well, now I'm going to open the trunk of this car and show you some of the things you should keep in your car during extreme weather and things that will really come in handy if you have a breakdown or if you need a jump start or things of that nature. So I'll go ahead and open the trunk here. I'll start over here. This is a pretty obvious one. Jumper cables. Make sure you got some jumper cables in case you have an incident where you left your lights on, the battery goes dead, and you're stuck out in cold weather. This will get you going again. This is an even better option that I keep around the shop, and you can pick one of these up on my Amazon affiliates page. This is just you plug it in and it charges, and this is a battery booster. They make even smaller ones for just a car. This one would start a truck. This is very handy to have in the car. You don't have to flag anyone down. You just hook it to your battery and away you go. You want to keep a set of gloves, a stocking cap, a scarf or something to keep around your neck to help keep you warm, a cell phone charger. If you have an issue with something other than your charging system, this would be perfect. And in fact, you could plug your phone into this. It has a USB port. This would get your phone charged. And then we got window scraper with a snow brush. You don't want to be driving down the road. I've seen some people going down the road and they have this little tiny square that they're looking out of. Just go ahead and clean your whole windshield off. This is your car, or you got a lot of money invested in it. You don't want to go off into a telephone pole because you're like, oh well, I didn't see that. Or here we have I don't know why Bob has this in his car. I'm kind of at a loss for words. It looks like Hoovie and Caitlyn Jenner. But what's pretty cool is Caitlyn Jenner she's a really big Porsche fan. She has some really cool Porsches. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool and all, but I really don't understand why that's in here. Anyways, a blanket. You want to have a blanket you can wrap up and keep warm if your battery's dead. You're not going to have any heat coming out. You might want to have one for each occupant in the car. If you got children, have one for each of them so you can all stay warm. But definitely at least have one blanket so somebody can stay warm. That could be a lifesaver there. That's pretty much some of the things you want to have in your trunk. And again, some of the stuff you can purchase on the Amazon affiliates page. You don't have to go shopping around. I've already got it listed for you. You just buy it and put it in your trunk. So that's that on what to keep on your trunk. I don't think you need a picture of Caitlyn Jenner. I don't think that's gonna help you if you're stranded. Maybe for this guy, he thinks it will. I don't know. For those of you with a diesel vehicle, it could be a diesel car, a diesel truck. There's some of the common issues that I hear about, and especially with farmers. They have a big tank on their yard of summer fuel, and they use it all year long, and they're not thinking. Then a cold snap comes, they're running summer fuel, and everything that they own that's diesel powered is now gelled up. Their tractor won't start, their truck won't start. So make sure you got the right fuel for the season, or keep it up to date. And if you do get into that scenario, Power Services sells Diesel 911. You put it in your tank and it'll help clear that up and take care of the gelling problem, and you can get you back on the road, but it's really an inconvenience. If you have a plug-in that keeps a block heater, make sure you have that plugged in if you know it's going to be cold the night before. If you have a diesel vehicle that sits around a lot and you don't drive it a whole lot and it has summer fuel in it, and all of a sudden you think, hey, I'm going to take this to work or take it and do something with it, a cold snap hits, there you go, you're gelled up again. You're on the side of the road or in a parking lot and horribly inconvenienced. If you get fresh fuel at the fueling station, it's going to be the correct fuel. It's going to be the winter fuel or the summer fuel. Make sure you're not running on 6-month-old fuel when the cold snap comes. And the last tip I'll give you today is if you have a car like this that you're probably not going to be driving in winter weather in a Corvette or a Lamborghini or Ferrari or a Porsche or something. Maybe you have a car that you keep immaculate. If that car is going to be stored for the winter with today's ethanol fuel, you want to buy Stabil. Makes a fuel stabilizer that you put in the fuel tank. That way it doesn't turn bad over the winter and mess up your fuel system. You also might want to think about a battery tender It plugs into the wall and you hook it up to your battery. It'll keep your battery fresh and keep it charged and ready for the spring when spring arrives. Tires, make sure they're aired up and so that they don't go flat on you and sit on a flat spot and ruin the tire. And you might check that over the winter, come in and check on your car, make sure you don't have a low tire. You don't want it to sit in that position all winter long with a flat tire. It can really mess up the shape of the tire. So you might want to put a mouse trap or a glue trap underneath your car to catch any mice, because trust me, I literally have done thousands and thousands of dollars of mouse damage. My Corvette sat over the winter, it won't start. I open the hood, there's a rat's nest. He chewed all the wires up. There's wires like spaghetti, kind of like my Rolls Royce. It's just wire spaghetti everywhere and chewed up. You don't want those things walking around in your vehicle. So anyways, those are some of the tips that I'm going to give you that'll help you through this winter. Hopefully it saves you some inconvenience or some trouble. If you like what you saw here, hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell, and if you see anything, any tools that we use today, you can buy at the Amazon affiliates page. We got some really cool vehicles coming up. We're getting close on having Hoovie's Viper done, and that'll be interesting to take that for a drive. I'm also getting close to the time to get the Murcielago out and start servicing that and checking it over and going through the list that the owner has on it. And I'll definitely do a video on that one. That'll be really cool. So anyways, thanks for watching.